Hey guys, what's up? My name's Jason and today I'm going to be taking you through the second part of our tutorial that we did yesterday, which was on how to recreate artwork from the game Lumino City. We won't be creating the artwork in the same exact way they created it because almost all the artwork in the game are actual real physical models. But we're going to be recreating it in Photoshop to try to get the same look. Now remember not to copy their games and claim it as your own work, because this is their work and they spent their time creating this game and coming up with the designs for it. The reason why we're going through and recreating their artwork is because we want to learn how we can create artwork like that, and once you start working on many different projects, you're going to start making connections and understanding how to create your own game artwork. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to recreate this book asset. So if you remember yesterday in the gameplay, we found this book that was left by her grandpa. And I thought it looked pretty interesting and I thought it would be a pretty fun and simple asset to recreate. Now we're also going to be recreating this paper texture as well as some of the letters and buttons on this page. So let's get started. Okay, let's get started. So first off, let's create our paper background. So the way we're going to do this is by doing a Google search for paper texture, and I found this one right here. Now I specifically did a search for book paper texture because that's the type of texture I'm looking for. I'll leave a link for this right here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this image and paste it into Photoshop. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my transform tool to rotate that. And for those of you that did not know, the transform tool is going to be Control T or Command T on your Mac. And once we get it to about the size we want, we'll go ahead and hit enter. Next, let's go ahead and create our book. So the way we're going to do this is by first creating a rectangular shape. So I'm going to come to my rectangle tool, and then I'm just going to create a shape like so. And I want it to be just a little bit more stretched out than a square, so something like that should work. Then I'm going to turn off my stroke and turn on my fill, and I want to fill it with a red. So maybe something like that should work, or maybe something over there. Hit OK. And actually, now that I think about it, I want to actually fill this with a gradient. So I'm going to come over to my gradient, and then I'm going to double click on this black down here, and I can choose my first color for my gradient. So I'm going to pick a pretty saturated red, and I'm going to come a little bit more towards my purplish reds. Then I'll go ahead and maybe a little bit more saturated, hit OK, then grab my other color and do the same thing. Bring this more over towards my purplish reds, and something like this should work. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Next, what we want to do is we want to add that text on there. So I'm going to switch over to my text tool, and I'm going to add a new layer in also. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a text box by clicking and dragging, just like that. And then we want to go ahead and type our text in. Now my text is at a huge size, so I want to go ahead and change this down to a smaller size so I can actually see it. And it's going to say the, and then we'll hit enter, handy, and then manual. And then we'll just go ahead and click down here to stretch this out so we can see it. Now we need to do some things to our characters, and our characters are just our letters. So we're going to highlight everything and come over here to our character panel. If your character panel isn't there, you want to come up to Window and then come down to Character and select that. And then it'll show up over here. Change the distance between each of our words. So right here, if we go ahead and click and slide this back and forth, you'll see that changes it. So we want to get them a little bit closer. Now we have our letters on bold right now, and we want to change the and the manual to regular. So I'm going to come up here to where it says bold and switch that to regular. Same with down here where it says manual, I'll change that to regular. And then we're going to go ahead and select all of this, and then we're going to hit these two uppercase T's, and that's going to make everything uppercase. Now let's go ahead and shrink down the by clicking right here on this T and dragging over, and you'll see we can drag it back and forth to increase and decrease the size. So we want that about that size, so 60 points. And then we're going to come down to handy, and we're going to increase that size, and we want to increase it to about a little past halfway on the page, and we actually want to increase it further than that because next we're going to go ahead and squash these letters. So the way we'll do that is by coming over here to where you see the T with the two arrows going left to right. And we'll go ahead and drag that, and you'll see we can squash it, and we just want our letters to be a little bit more skinny and narrow in the vertical direction. So we'll bring that to about there. And then we still might want to bring that up. Perfect. Now you'll see that it's going over the part. So what we need to do is we need to select both of those, and then we need to readjust the distance between those two words. So I'll bring it to about there, should be good. And then we're going to come down to manual, and we want to change the size of this also. So I'm going to bring it up to about that size so it goes all the way across our box. And then we can go ahead and change the distance between those two words. And then I want to stretch this out a little bit more, so I'm going to come over to the T with the arrow going left to right, and I'm going to drag that over. And I don't want to drag it over too much, but just enough. So we're actually going to have to shrink down our size so we can get it all in there, just like so. Now the reason why I did that is so I can get more of a square letter, and I'm going to do the same thing on the V. So I'll select the V, and then I'm going to go ahead and stretch it out just a little bit more to about there. So each one of those letters would basically fit into a square box. Now this handy still isn't looking tall enough for me, so I'm going to go ahead and select it and stretch it out by pulling this back and forth. So I'm going to stretch it out to about there, and then I can go ahead and readjust how far away that is from the V. So I'm going to put it about there, should be good. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and drag this up, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my grab and move tool and push that up to the top, just like so. Now, if you didn't catch it, the text that I'm using is called Calibri. It's a pretty standard text, and you'll already find it uploaded into Photoshop. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next part of our text. So I'm going to come back over to my text tool, and I'm going to create a new box underneath here. And then we can go ahead and start typing in this. And we want to bring our font size down to, let's try 48. And we'll go ahead and type out our text. So ideas, enter, sketches, enter, and how things work. Now you can't see it because we have our text spaced out too much, but if I go ahead and drag this down, it shows up. So now I can select all of that, come to my character panel, and I'm going to go ahead and first off bring these closer together. Now we don't want them too close, but we want them closer. So I'm going to bring them to about there. Next, I'm going to go ahead and change this from being set to the left side of my box and set it to the center, just like so. Then I want to go ahead and hit enter right here so that we get this and all by itself. And then I can go ahead and drag our box shape up. And then using my grab and move tool, I'm going to go ahead and move that up to about there. Perfect. Now we have the cover for a book. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and warp all of this so that it becomes in the correct perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and first off rasterize these layers. So starting with my red layer, I'm going to go ahead and right click and come up to rasterize layer. So now that's no longer a shape, meaning that it's no longer a vector item. So now I can go ahead and select my next text layer and merge these two layers together. So now the red layer and the text layer are one, and I can do the same thing with my next text layer. And make sure you have your text correct, because you're not going to be able to change your text once you do this. Next, let's go ahead and turn on our transform tool, and then we're going to right click and come to skew, and then that's going to allow us to drag this over without messing up the actual straight horizontal line of our book. So I want to drag that over to about 7 degrees. Same with the other side. So you'll see in this little black box, it tells you how far over you are. So I'm going to go to about 7 degrees on the other side also, and then we'll hit enter. And then we can go ahead and turn our transform tool back on and rotate it like so. So I'm going to rotate it to about there, should be good. Hit enter. Next, let's go ahead and create the thickness of our book. So the way we're going to do that is by selecting our shape by hitting Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and then clicking your thumbnail on your layer. And now you see we get that nice selection around our book. And then we'll add a new layer underneath this, and I'm going to go ahead and fill it in with a darker version of this red. So I'll select it with my eyedropper, come into my color picker, and I'll come straight down like so, and we want it to be pretty dang dark. You can see the difference between your original color and the new color. So let's go ahead and select a color about there. So about in the middle of our values. We'll hit OK, and I'll go ahead and use my fill tool to fill that in. And you can't see it because it's behind my book cover, but if I use my arrow keys on my keyboard, I can go ahead and nudge that down just like so. And once we get it to about that position, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in there, and using my brush tool and making sure I'm on a hard-edged brush, and bring my brush size down. I'm going to go ahead and paint in like so. So that way we get that nice edge. Let's go ahead and zoom out. Next, let's go ahead and make a copy of this layer, and then we're going to drag it straight down, holding down shift to make sure it goes straight down vertically. So I'm going to bring it down to about there. Then we can go ahead and hit enter. And then I'm going to go ahead and zoom in there and erase away this area that's sticking over the edge. So I'll erase it to about there, maybe a little bit more straight. Perfect. Next, we want to add the spine of our book. So let's come over here. The way we're going to do this is first we're going to use our polygonal lasso tool. And then we're going to click from this corner to this corner, and then come all the way over to this corner, come straight down to that corner, and then come all the way over to this corner. Then we're going to go ahead and select our dark red color, and we want to find a little bit lighter version of that. So I'm going to come up to about there, should be good. We'll hit OK. Now we can go ahead and fill that in. Before you do that, make sure you fill this in on a new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer between these two dark red layers. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. And you'll notice that you can't see it except for right here, and that's because this layer right here, the bottom one, is actually in front of our top one. So we need to actually grab that guy and drag him underneath him, grab our other guy and drag him back above, so they'll switch places. And then we want to drag our spine layer above that one so it covers up that little dark edge. Alright, great. Next, let's switch over to our brush tool, and we're going to bring the brush size up pretty dang large. So somewhere about there should be good. Something like that. And we're going to go ahead and paint a spot just like so, so that this edge and this edge are being touched by the edge of the circle. So we get that nice curve in there. Then we're going to go ahead and use our lasso tool to select this area of our circle because we don't want it, and then we'll hit delete. Next, we're going to come back over to our brush tool, and then we want to select this dark red color, and we're going to do the same thing we did over here, but on this inside edge. So we're going to go to right there. And the reason why we're using our dark color is because now we're going to switch over to our erase tool, and we want the size that's just right underneath this size of brush. And we're going to erase right up like so, and then we can erase all this area away. And the reason why we did that is so that now we get a nice spine edge, and it gives some thickness to our spine. It's hard to see now, but if I turn off this back layer, you see we have that nice thickness to our spine. Now let's turn that layer back on. Now lastly, what we want to do is we want to add in those book pages. The way we'll do this is by creating a new layer in between our two dark red layers for the back cover and the front cover. And using my lasso tool, I'm going to click from right here and then come down diagonally like so. And then I'm going to come straight across, trying to follow this diagonal line here. So I'll come to all the way over here behind the spine of my book. And then I'm going to go ahead and come around like so. And then we can go ahead and fill that in. Now I'm going to fill that in with a light yellowish orange color. So somewhere about in there should be good. Hit OK. And then we can fill that in. Perfect. Now lastly, what we want to do is switch back over to our erase tool, and we can go ahead and erase away a curve in there so it looks more like a real book. Alright, let's zoom out and see how that looks. Great, I think we got pretty dang close. Let's go ahead and select all of our layers except for this top reference layer, and then we're going to put them into a folder by clicking the folder button, and then we can go ahead and copy this folder, open that folder back up, select all the layers, right click and merge layers. Now the reason why we did that is because we want one folder that has all of our layers in it for backup, and we can go ahead and turn that off because we don't need it anymore. That's just in case we ever need to go back and change anything about it. This second one is so it's easier to work with. So what we want to do with this merged one is we want to go ahead and shrink it down to about that size. Great, we'll hit enter. And next, we're going to go ahead and create the circle around it. So this is really easy. You just select your shape tool over here, come to ellipse tool, and then we're going to go ahead and click in the center and hold shift so we get a perfect circle, and we'll bring that out to about there. And then we're going to change the width of our stroke from 15 pixels to 9 pixels. We'll see how that looks. That looks much better. Then we can go ahead and use our grab and move tool to get that centered with our book. Now, if we have a look at our reference for our book, so this is what the page looks like. Now, I'm not going to take you through all of this because it's pretty obvious how you make a line, how you make your text, but I will show you how to create this text over here and then how to make it out of focus. So let's go ahead and come back in here, make it out of focus. Now let's have a look at the full page reference. So right here, this is what the full page looks like. Now we're not going to recreate this exactly because it's going to take too long, but we can recreate this play button, and we can also recreate this fig.07, and then I'll show you how to make it look like it's out of focus. So first, let's start with this play button. So let's come back into our document, and then we can go ahead and turn off our reference for now. And then let's add a new layer above this, and we're going to zoom in there, and using our circular tool again, we're going to go ahead and make a perfect circle about that size, and we want to fill it in with the same color as our book. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the stroke and come into my fill, and then I'm going to change the color to this color right here. We'll hit OK. So now we have our button basic shape right there. Now let's go ahead and grab this and move it into place. So we want it about there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on an effect for this shape. So I'm going to come down to Effects, Drop Shadow, and then I already have this set up the way I want it. So I just have a darker version of this color selected. I'll hit OK, and then my distance is set at 13 pixels, my speed is set at 100%, and my size is set at 0 pixels because we don't want it any bigger than the actual circle itself. And we have the speed set to 100 because we want a 100% hard edge on this. Then I'm just going to really quick change the angle by grabbing this little lever right here, and I can change the angle by dragging it over like that, and I just want it more at that angle. Then I'll go ahead and hit OK. And lastly, what I want to do is I want to come into my shape tool again, but I'm going to hold down on it, and then I'm going to come down to custom shapes. And up here you see you have your different custom shapes you can choose from. Now I already have a triangle selected. If you don't have all of these shapes in Photoshop, it's because you need to import them. So what you need to do is click on this little gear here, and then you need to come down to load shapes, and that will load all the shapes in here. So what I'm going to do with this triangle is I'm going to go ahead and drag a perfect triangle out by holding shift while I do it, and I want it about that size. And then I'm going to change my fill from red to white. Great. So now we can go ahead and use a grab and move tool and move that into position. Now play button is not at that angle, so we need to get it to the correct angle right there. Hit enter, and then I'm going to go ahead and put that into position like so. So that's how you can create a play button really quickly. Next, let's go ahead and move on to our text over here. So I'm going to start off by creating a text that says fig period. So I'm going to capitalize the F and then IG. And then we need to come into our character panel, and we need to turn off the all caps. So I'm going to hit those two capitalized T's. So now we have our capitalized F, and our other two letters are lowercase. Next, I'm going to change my font from Calibri to Georgia. So this one right here, this is also a preloaded font in Photoshop, so we'll select that, and then I'm going to change it from regular to italic. So now we get that nice italic look. I also want to add a period to that, and then we'll select that and change the color from this tan color I have selected to a black. And actually we're going to change it to a light gray because we don't want it too dark. Then we'll hit OK. Next, let's go ahead and add in our numbers. So I'm gonna unselect out of this and then switch back over to my text tool and go ahead and make a box like so. And then I'm just going to type in 07. Then I'm gonna select that, and I'm gonna change this back to Calibri. And then I'm gonna change it from italic to bold. And then we can go ahead and play with this over here in our character panel. So first off, I wanna stretch it so it's really tall. So I'm gonna stretch it to about there, and then I'm going to stretch it out widthwise, but for the most part we want it pretty skinny. And then I'm going to bring up the size to about there, and then we can go ahead and unselect out of this, see how that looks. Alright, I think that'll work. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab and move that, and I think I want to bring it up in size just a little bit more to about there, and then I'll drag that over like so. So we want it coming off the page just a little bit, and then I'm going to come over to my figure, and I'm going to drag that over like so. Now I'm actually going to change the color from this dark gray to a solid black. Now how do we add that blur to this? So if we come back to our reference, you'll see they have this nice out of focus blur. The way we can create that is by first coming over to our blur tool, which is this one that looks like a big raindrop, and we'll select it. And then if we try to use it on this, it says that we can't because the layer is not rasterized, so we want to go ahead and hit OK, and now our layer is rasterized, and we can go ahead and blur that just by clicking and drawing on it. And so we can do that a few times. The closer to the bottom, I'm going to blur it out a little bit more, like so. But now we get that really cool blurred look. Now, lastly, what we need to do is we need to let this texture of our paper come through our images. So we need to select all of our images. We're going to put those all into a folder. We're going to copy that folder. We can grab this other folder and drag it underneath, turn it off because we don't need it. We just need it for backup. And then we're going to open this folder back up, select all of them, right click and merge layers. So now those are all one layer. The reason why we did this is because now we can change the blend mode on all of them simultaneously. So we're going to change it to multiply. And now you'll see if we zoom in there, you can see that book texture through our actual image. Now we want to add some more texture to this. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to grab this cement texture that I have here, and I'm going to go ahead and select it with my marquee tool and copy it. Now I don't have a link for this cement texture, but all you have to do is go to Google Images and do a search for cement or concrete or sidewalk texture. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in like so. And then I'm going to change the blend mode from normal to multiply also. And then I'm going to bring the opacity down on this to about 13%. We want it pretty light. Now, lastly, let's go ahead and add some more color to this. If we look back at our reference, their paper looks a little bit more yellow than ours. So we're going to add a new layer above all of this, and then we're going to select the color yellow, and it can be completely saturated. And you can also play around with your own colors. I want to make sure I'm on a soft edged brush, and we're going to bring our brush size up very large. I'll go ahead and paint my canvas like so, and then I'm going to switch over to more of a red color, and we'll hit OK. And I'm just going to paint these outer edges like so, and again, this doesn't have to be perfect. Then we'll switch over to a white color, and I'm going to bring my brush opacity down to 30% by hitting the number 3 on my keyboard, and then I can go ahead and paint in that center area like so. And then I'm going to change the blend mode on this layer from normal to overlay. And then I can go ahead and turn that opacity down to about, let's come to 36%. So now that just adds a little bit more color to here. Now you can add all types of textures and color layers on top of this to make it look the way you want. Alright, that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something from it. Now, if you want more tutorials like this, go ahead and comment below and let me know what games you want to learn how to recreate. Thanks for watching, my name's Jason, and have a great life. If you enjoyed this tutorial, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll be sending you many more videos just like this one.